gosh. Okay. Oh god, I gotta get all through the. Okay. One more. Big jump. So today we're learning how to make a checkpoint. This was a spontaneous decision. There is no ulterior motive as to why we're making a checkpoint. And it certainly has nothing to do with me sucking at an obby. So, want to save bad players on your obby from tearing their hair out? Yes. Why not make a checkpoint?
Those are fun.
So, how does one go about making a checkpoint?
I have a specimen here.
So, I've got a spawn point. We're not going to use this spawn location, but I am going to steal the decal off of it. We're going to make our checkpoint model by placing down our part. And let's make it a squared size. I like 10 by 10. So what I'm going to do is sneakily steal our spawn point decal and slap this bad boy in here. And boom, we have a not spawn point. So once we've got our spawn point, make sure you anchor it so your character can't push it around. And
bada bing, bada boom, we have a checkpoint.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take our models and place them out in an obby. I have an example here. This is a spawn location, and these are checkpoints. Now, I have them in a folder, and that's actually pretty important because this code isn't going to work if you don't have them in a folder. So make sure you have all your checkpoints in a checkpoint folder. You can name it checkpoints, you can name it zippity-doo-dah, whatever, but just make sure that they're inside of some sort of folder. Now I have our example obby here. This is just to test the functionality of our checkpoints. Allow me to demonstrate. So I've got us an example kill brick underneath our lava that's gonna absolutely obliterate our character.
Down to the atoms.
And we're gonna use this to test each of our checkpoints and see if they actually work. So let's slap a server script in server script service where all the good little scripts belong. I'm going to call this checkpoints just so we know what this does. And so what we're going to do is start with our arguments. First, we're going to get our file inside the workspace as a variable. So I'm going to call this variable checkpoints, and we're going to set this to workspace.checkpoints, not the singular checkpoint, but the checkpoints folder. And I'm going to call get children. Get children turns all of the children inside of this file into an array. So now checkpoints is an array with each of these inside as an object. So I'm going to make a table underneath it, and I'm going to call it current checkpoints. And we're going to use this table to keep track of the checkpoint that's bound to our users. So let's first start by compiling all of our checkpoints. Let's loop through all of our checkpoints. We're going to say for I equals 1, checkpoints do. This is going to create an iterator loop that's going to go through each of these checkpoints. Each time it goes through, this I is going to increase by 1 until it reaches the maximum length of our checkpoint array. So to get the value inside the array that it's looping over, all we have to say is say local checkpoint equals checkpoints square brackets index, or I, our little variable here. So I'll do some notes here. This says returns current checkpoint object that we are iterating through. So in case one of you guys is a numbnuts and sticks something in here that's not an actual checkpoint block, we're going to do what's called a sanity check. A sanity check is basically when you check to make sure things are what they should be. So we're expecting this checkpoint to be a part, but it's totally possible maybe one of the other devs in our game slaps a folder in here. And our script is going to assume that this is a checkpoint, which is an object. And if we try to put a touch connection to this folder, then our whole script's going to error and our entire system's going to break. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run a sanity check. We're going to double check to make sure this is actually a base part. So instead of nesting a bunch of if statements, we'll just do a guard clause and say, if not, checkpoint is a base part, then continue. So what this does is this says, if checkpoint is a base part, if this is true and it is a base part, then this statement becomes true. So if not, if this is false, then continue. So basically, this is the opposite of if checkpoint is a base part. This is if it's not a base part. Then continue. Continue is basically just going to skip to the next iteration on our loop. So now on line 10, we can guarantee that our value checkpoint is actually going to be a checkpoint. We can set a touch connection.
We're gonna touch it.
We're going to say checkpoint.touched. We're going to do open and close parentheses function. Open and close parentheses, drop down there. And then in here, we're going to type part. So part's the part that just touched our checkpoint.
Like you could, G.
And we're going to check if that part belongs to our character. So to do that, we'll set a variable. We'll say local humanoid equals part.parent. Find first child of class humanoid. And so this is going to look inside the parent of our part, which if it's a player like us here, it's going to be our model. And it's going to look for a class in here or an object that is a humanoid. We'll set up another guard clause. If not humanoid, then return. Now we're going to get our player. We'll say local player equals game get service players get player from character part.parent. If we hit line 16, we know for a fact that humanoid is a humanoid. This part's parent has one inside of it, therefore part.parent is a character model. That way we can just run this assumption, set our player to get player from character. So now let's just say current checkpoints player.userID equals checkpoint. Now there's a couple of issues with our logic here. Not issues, but things that could be improved upon. So if any of you have messed with this event before, it fires multiple times when a single object touches it. And so to fix that, we're going to add what's called a debounce to ensure that this connection only gets fired once in a timely manner rather than 16, 20 times off of one touch. So let's create a variable called debounce. Local debounce equals false. And then here we'll say if not humanoid or debounce. So if debounce is true, then just return an end. And right here we'll set debounce to true. Now we'll add a delay. We'll say task.delay 0.05, just a really short amount of time. And here we'll set our debounce to false again. But this makes sure that this fires once per part rather than just firing a ton of times off of one part touching it. Now there's another thing. What if a player touches the checkpoint and this line of code runs, but they're already bound to this checkpoint? Well, we're just having redundancy. We're running the same code twice every time they touch it. So let's add another return here where we'll say if current checkpoints player.userID equals checkpoint. So if this has already been done, if this is already their bound checkpoint, then just return end the function. So now we've got a system that keeps track of what checkpoint our players currently attached to. Now let's set it so that when they respawn on top of this checkpoint. We'll say game get service players dot player added connect function player. So every time a player joins the game, we get their variable here. We'll set a def connection. So players joined, set checkpoint connection. We're going to check if they respawn. We'll say player dot character added. This is going to go off every time they respawn. Connect function, and it passes in their character. So now that we're here, let's check if they currently have a checkpoint attached to them. So we'll say if current checkpoints player user ID, then return. And then let's add a not here to reverse this statement. So if they do not have a bound checkpoint, then just return. That means they haven't touched a checkpoint. We don't need to try to spawn them onto something. Maybe they're outside the obby or they finished it. So this part's important. When they first respawn, the heartbeat that this event is going off of, so basically the frame that this event fires and this code's going to run, our character can't be moved. So if you just teleport them right here to the checkpoint, your system's not going to work. And the code's going to seem like it's supposed to work because the logic does, but because this is still on the same frame this event's fired, the character isn't currently ready to be moved. So it's going to ignore your move request and then just spawn them at a spawn point like nothing happened. So we have to pause for one frame. So we'll say task.wait. If we leave this blank, it's going to wait for the shortest possible amount of time, which is a single frame. So task.wait. Then we can run our move code. Local root equals character, wait for child, humanoid root part. I'm using wait for child because their character just spawned in. Again, this is the frame it spawned in. So if for whatever reason the root part's taking a second, maybe your character has some lag, we're gonna wait just a minute until this goes off. So now we'll say root.anchored equals true. We can't move a player if their root part is not anchored. So if we anchor their root part, then we can teleport them and then unanchor their root part and they can move again. So let's set our root's C-frame to current checkpoints player.user ID .C-frame. This is our checkpoint part. So we're setting their C-frame to our checkpoint C-frame. And because our checkpoint is currently right here, they'll be spawned kind of in the ground. So we're going to add a little bit of an offset. C-frame.new, vector3.new, and we just want to add like 5 studs onto their Y. Now that we've got the teleport code done, let's set our roots anchored to false. All right, let's give this a shot. Let's see if our checkpoints work. So if I step on our first checkpoint and I make a mistake and die in the obby, boom, we respawn right on top of our checkpoint. If we progress to the next one and we end up dying, we're right back on the next checkpoint. If we go all the way to the end and just ignore all these checkpoints, and then we jump off, we spawn right back on the checkpoint that we touched.
So never fear, your bad players have a solution.
Now, with checkpoints in your obby, you won't have your users tearing their hair out and cursing you out on your group comments.
This obby sucks. I died 10 times and had to restart at the base because it's hardcore. This is garbage. Somebody needs to find this step.
So that's how you make checkpoints. Time for a shameless plug.
This video is sponsored by me, my wallet.
If you're interested in checking out these models, head down to the link in the description or the top comment, depending on if YouTube likes me yet. and go download this model for free. I also have a coding course there you can check out, The Basics of Roblox Luau, where you learn everything you need to know, start to finish, to be able to make your first Roblox game. Okay, we even polish the module off with making a survival game.
Super cool. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching my video. Love ya, like and subscribe.